so much. Thank you so much for being here. And for those of you who were here for the service this morning, and that may be the majority of you, you've already heard me talking this morning about what I call the politics of fear versus the politics of love. And you heard me speak about my experience the other day at the Homestead Attainment Center in Homestead, Florida. This morning, I didn't want to go into, I didn't feel it was appropriate given that it was a church service. I didn't want to go into any real detail about my specifically running for president. But this gives us an opportunity to go further into why I'm running, what my beliefs are, and what I feel we need to do as Americans at this time. First of all, the United States has a mission statement. And that mission statement is written in our Declaration of Independence. And the principles of the Declaration of Independence are these. Number one, that all are created equal. That God gave all the unalienable rights of life and of liberty and of the pursuit of happiness. And that governments are instituted among men to secure those rights. Now that's it right there. That's our mission statement. Everybody's equal. Everybody has equal rights given to them by God of life and of liberty and of the pursuit of happiness. And that the purpose of government is to secure those rights. And at the Battle of Gettysburg, Lincoln, in referring to those who died there, and referring to that principle that all men are created equal, and that the government's function is to secure the rights of all to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. He said that they had sacrificed their lives so that a government of the people, we need to psychologically and emotionally rebond with those principles. They have become lacking in moral force. They're written, they're inscribed on marble walls. They're written on parchment. And when our children are in the 8th grade, we send them to Washington, D.C. to look at those words behind glass. If that's all they are, they lose their moral force. It is said in the Jewish religion that every generation must rediscover God for itself. And in a democracy, every generation must rediscover our own relationship to these principles. When we do not, and if we do not, we become easy to play. We become easy to fool. We become easy to distract. Now, when our founders said that the only secure repository for power in the United States was in the hands of the people, that's exactly what he meant. And this goes much deeper than just that we get to elect our representatives. It means also that we are the ones who are to be ever vigilant. We are the ones who must be ever alert to the threats against us. Governments are instituted to secure our rights. Governments are instituted only to secure our rights. And the whole point of the founding of this country was to overthrow a situation in which power was held only in the hands of a very few people. The entire idea, the entire paradigm shift, the entire radicalism of American democracy is the overthrow of aristocracy, the overthrow of a system in which government served only to protect the rights of a few. That's what an aristocracy was. A few people had the right to own land. A few people had the right to create wealth. A few people had the right to be educated. And no one else did. Everyone else was little more than a serf. We repudiated that in 1776. What has happened in our country in the last 40 years is that we have, on the part of many consciously, and on the part of too many of us unconsciously reverted. We have regressed. A nation can regress just like an individual can regress. We have reverted and regressed to what is essentially an aristocratic paradigm, where our government in this country is doing more through public policy after public policy to secure the rights of a tiny group of people as opposed to everyone else. Ladies and gentlemen, that's aristocracy. We have transitioned from a democracy to an aristocracy. We repudiated that in 1776. It is time for us to repudiate it again. When Abraham Lincoln said that a government of the people, by the people, and for the people would not perish from the earth, you and I as a generation must understand it's perishing now. It is perishing now. It is perishing on our watch. Now, money is a good thing. This is not about money's bad. That's not a problem at all. That's a good thing. We celebrate that in America people can create wealth. And many people have created great wealth very righteously. The problem in America is not that people can create wealth. The problem in America today is that not enough people can create wealth. There's a difference between the accumulation of wealth and aristocracy. The accumulation of wealth is the accumulation of wealth, which in many cases, as I said, is done in a righteous manner. An aristocracy, however, is when your government actually works in such a way as to make it easier for those who already have money to get very, very wealthy, and makes it harder for other people who do not have money to even make it at all. Now, to expect the governmental establishment that created this situation to be the ones to then change this situation is somewhat naive. This has been happening since the 1980s. Now let's go back a little bit to those days in 1776. The same men who risked their lives by signing the Declaration of Independence, bequeathing to us those principles, and they were risking their lives, because if the war for independence had been lost by the American colonies, all of the signers of the Declaration of Independence would have been hanged. They would have been executed as traitors against the King of England. So on one hand, they bequeathed to us the most enlightened, aspirational, illumined principles that have ever in history formed the foundational core of a nation. That's where it began, but that's also where it got gnarly. Because 41 of them were slave owners. So this dichotomy has always been with us. It's baked into the cake. It's a characterological polarity in the American character. On one hand, we are based on the most enlightened principles that have ever formed the founding of a nation. And it is also true that from the beginning, our country has often been the primary perpetrators of transgression, often very violent transgression, against those principles. As evidenced by the fact that the very men who wrote those principles, 41 of them owned slaves. Now that's where it began. But our historical narrative is such that we have tended over time to self-correct. So there has been in every generation, and there is in ours no less than in any other, people who on one hand, their hearts are ablaze with the possibilities of democracy. The very possibility that there could be a place on this earth where anyone can soar, where anyone can self-actualize, where everyone has the right to be who they are, to do what they wish, to get ahead, to actualize and manifest their dreams. That is so profound, not just for you, not just for you, not just for me, but for all of humanity. And it's not just a right that is given to us, it is a responsibility in order to make sure that in our time, it is nurtured, it is protected, made even better, so that we can bequeath it to our children. But there have also been in every generation, and there are in ours, whose basic view about all that is, no, that's not what we're going to be doing. Nothing that's happening is new. Now, what has happened historically is that Had slavery, but then a generation rose up and responded to slavery with abolition. Had the suppression of women, generation rose up with the women's suffrage movement. Had institutionalized white supremacy and segregation in the American South, and a generation rose up with the civil rights movement. Gay people not even allowed to be married, a generation rose up with the American marriage equality movement. And I remind you that in not one of those cases did the government lead the effort of self-correction. Abolition did not come from the government. It came from the abolitionist movement, which came from the early evangelicals and the Quakers. The government didn't wake up one day and say, let's free the slaves. The abolitionist movement meant the people stepped in. And the government didn't wake up one day and say, oh, let's give women the right to vote. That's not what happened. With the women's suffragette movement, women rose up, the people stepped in. And the government did not wake up one day and say, let's end segregation. No, Martin Luther King, it was the civil rights movement, the people stepped in. Ladies and gentlemen, what's happening on this planet today is not, in this country today, is not that different than what has happened before. It is not one evil institution, but it is a mindset that comes from the same place. That a few people should get to own the resources of this country. A few people should get the freedoms of this country. A few people should get the opportunities of this country. This is what Franklin Roosevelt was referring to when he called them economic royalists. To expect the governmental establishment system that has been so corrupted by those forces because of the undue influence of the money of those forces, to the point where the government is little more than an advocate for those forces, placing time and time and time again advocacy for the short-term profits of those forces before advocacy for the health and well-being of the people of this country, the people of the world, and the people of this planet, expecting the same system that drove us into this ditch to now drive us out of this ditch means we're being played for fools.
Right. Yeah.
It is time, once again, for the people to speak up. The idea that the only people who are qualified, that they're the only ones who are qualified, right? And could we please be grown up here? And one of the things that I have noticed in my 35-year career is that people are smart. I have worked up close and personal with people for 35 years, and I always say in my career, and many of you know my career, people don't usually come to me because things are going well. So I'm used to being with people who just learned something really difficult is happening. A child might be on drugs, there might be a diagnosis of cancer, there might be a marriage that's falling apart, there might be a bankruptcy, a professional failure. Things happen in life that are very difficult. And one of the things that I've learned, and I've learned this living my own life too, one of the things I've seen in people is that often when we get that bad news, and we learn that something really terrible is going on, so many superficial preoccupations drop away in 5 minutes. And I have seen people get so intelligent so quickly. People get really noble really quickly. We drop the disguises, we drop the silliness. We get serious. The doctor's going to tell you what the results are. The doctor's coming in. Somebody's going to tell you how maybe you can get out of this bankruptcy. You get real serious. You hear your child is on heroin and somebody's going to talk to you about doing an intervention and you get really serious. And I've seen something really profound there. I've seen that if you unwrap all the posturing, deep down, we're really intelligent people and we're really noble people. And there is a power in all of us when we are honest, when we get real, when we get deep, and when we get wise, situations transform. Now we have a problem in this country. This is serious. We have a transition from democracy to aristocracy, which is well underway. You can call it corporatocracy, you can call it oligarchy, it doesn't matter. I talk about aristocracy because many of us understand it's the archetype that matters. It's the archetype that matters. It's just a new form. Today it's a corporatocracy because it's about a matrix of corporate power. What matters, however, is the underlying archetype of a few people getting to have the goods at the expense of the majority of others, as evidenced by 1% of all Americans owning more wealth than the bottom 90%. So our economic system that theoretically, trickle-down economics, first promulgated in the 1980s, was that if we allowed the American corporation to make fiduciary financial responsibility to the stockholders their bottom line, without having to concern itself with any moral or ethical responsibility to the workers, to the community, to any other stakeholders beyond those stockholders, then that would be a way to order our society. And we were told that the money would trickle down because those people would get so rich and they'd create so many jobs and it would lift all boats. Well, I think after 40 years we can say the jury is in. Not only has it not lifted all boats, it has left millions without even a life vest. To the point where 40% of all Americans have a difficult time just making ends meet, which means in psychological and emotional terms, 40% of all Americans, millions and millions and millions of people live with chronic economic tension and anxiety. Now, the government then, because it was so corrupted by the money that comes from those forces, is now more of a handmaiden to those forces than it is to us, and that's what I mean by our having completely allowed a government of the people, by the people, and for the people to become a government of a few of the people, by a few of the people, for a few of the people, of the multinational corporations, by multinational corporations, and for multinational corporations. First, the health insurance companies get the profits they need, Big Pharma gets the profits they need, agribusiness gets the profits it needs, gun manufacturers get the profits they need, fossil fuel companies get the profits they need, chemical companies get the profits they need, defense contractors get the profits they need. And by the way, there is no stopping at need because it's an insatiable appetite. So you're never going to hear that system say, okay, I got enough now, I got all I need. It's never going to say that. Now, what do you call an individual that has no sense of moral conscience? What do you call an individual that has no sense of ethics? What do you call an individual who, I only want to get mine, and I just don't even really care what you think. What do you call that, ladies and gentlemen?
Sociopath.
A sociopath. That's a sociopath. In fact, I just want mine, and you're not even on my screen what you need. That's a sociopath. So what do you call an economic system that is run by that same kind of governing principle, if not a sociopathic economic system? Now, I think it's worth noting that the main articulator of trickle-down economics, the main person who said, get the government out, let market principles rule and be the organizing principle, he himself, interestingly enough, said, but of course we're going to have a universal basic income because otherwise it wouldn't be safe. But they left out that part. His name was Milton Friedman. He himself said there's going to have to be a universal basic income if you do that. So we are where we are. And this is locked. And this is entrenched. And this has turned the American people into asking for what we should not even have to ask for. Pretty please, that's the role we now have with our government. Pretty please, could I maybe have a $100,000 grant here? Pretty please, could we maybe have $1 million in the budget put on this? Meanwhile, they're passing things like a $2 trillion tax cut. $2 trillion. Where 83 cents of every dollar goes to the very richest individuals and corporations. Even though it's long established now, this whole trickle-down theory thing is a trickle-down illusion.
Yeah.
This is what so let me ask you this. Just like I said, if an individual has no conscience, you call it a sociopath. Somebody has to help me out here. What do you call a person who takes all your money? Thief. It's a theft. It's a theft. It has been going on and accumulating for decades. And it's been a mass movement of the economic resources of this country into the hands of a very few people. So we have now $2 trillion in a tax cut, 83 cents of every dollar to the very richest. We have things like $26 billion in corporate subsidies to the fossil fuel companies. In 1 year, $26 billion. The pharmaceutical companies have done so much to, when these major corporations give millions and millions of dollars to campaign donations, they're doing it for a reason, They're not doing it to be nice. They're doing it because there's a quid pro quo. Because they're going to make sure that people who are elected are going to pass the policies they want, such as the fact that pharmaceutical companies, the United States government is not allowed to negotiate with pharmaceutical companies to lower our drug prices. I know a man very close to me. I have a disabled baby. The MRI that she needs to have would cost $4,000. He's told it would have to be out of pocket. He could go over to Canada and get that MRI for $900. And in addition to that, anybody here who thinks that our national security agenda is based only on our legitimate security needs might want to grow up in there. Because, in 1961, when Dwight Eisenhower, and some of us are old enough to remember, for those of you who aren't old enough, I want you to go Google this. Because in 1961, when Dwight Eisenhower, a Republican president, left office in his farewell address, and this man was the Supreme Allied Commander in World War II. He was the Supreme Allied Commander of all Allied forces that fought World War II. This man understood. But before World War II, we did not have a standing army. After World War II, obviously we need a standing army. But he warned us of what he called the military-industrial complex. He originally wrote it as the military-industrial congressional. And once you make this kind of thing such big business. So I have great respect for the U.S. military. Nothing that I'm saying now is a critique of the military. The criticisms I have are not of the military decisions. It's the political decisions. I think we all would agree that the United States has to have a strong military. I see a military the way I see a surgeon. Of course, if you're going to have surgery, you have to have the best surgeon. But you would only have surgery if you absolutely had to. But we have a situation now where the manufacturing of military equipment is such big business that you have the billions of dollars that will go towards legitimate security needs, and then you have hundreds of billions on top of that, which have to do with short-term profits for defense contractors. But this is the deal, ladies and gentlemen. Apparently we're not supposed to talk about that, are we? Remember what I said to you a few minutes ago, that my experience of people is that when we're in trouble, we get deep and we get real and we get intelligent. There's no one in this room, who if somebody came and said that someone very close to you, who you love very much, was in trouble, that you wouldn't be very intelligent listening to the doctor, very intelligent listening to the rehab specialist, very intelligent listening to the accountant. But when it comes to politics, which should be our collective conversation, which will help us navigate this point in order to get to the other side of it, the conversation itself is superficial, it is shallow, and that is because it is the conversation dictated by the very forces that have brought all this about. You could call it the political media industrial complex. And I'm wondering, you and I, where you might have had some people, anybody have any pollsters call you? Anybody ask you about the military industrial complex? Anybody ask you about those millions of traumatized American children? When it is listed for you what the issues are. You ever notice that? They don't ask you what the issues are. They tell you what the issues are. So I want to tell you what the issues are that I believe we have to look at. Millions of American children go to school every single day in schools that do not even have the adequate school supplies with which to teach a child to read. If a child cannot learn to read by the age of 8, the chances of high school graduation are drastically decreased, and the chances of incarceration are drastically increased. There are roughly 41 million hungry Americans in the United States, the richest country in the world. It's estimated that there are roughly 13 million children. So that means roughly 13 million children go to school every day hungry. I met a high school principal in Las Vegas, Nevada, who said she has elementary school students on suicide watch. Now, the school district has budgeted some money for social workers to go into the schools. She called up the district and said, I have elementary school kids who are on suicide watch. I need a social worker. And she was told by the district, we can't send you one. Your school is not the worst. We have millions of American children living in what's often referred to as America's domestic war zones, where psychologists tell us that the PTSD of a returning veteran from Afghanistan or Iraq is no more severe than the PTSD of these children. These children live in such violence in their homes, in their communities, in their schools. We have children who are chronically traumatized before preschool. Now, to me, this is a humanitarian emergency. Just like the children at the border that we were talking about all morning, that's called in aid language a screaming emergency. The children I'm speaking to you about now are what's called a silent emergency. We should be rescuing these children, no differently than if they were the victims of a natural disaster. But let me ask you, what has the political establishment done? And I want to go back to our mission statement, if I might, because it says that all men have the inalienable rights given by God to pursue happiness. Are these children able to pursue happiness? The vast majority of them are full-on citizens of the United States. And so shouldn't government be securing their rights? Well, no. Let's talk about why. Why is it that the political establishment merely normalizes the despair of these children? I'll tell you why. Because they're not old enough to vote, so there's no constituency, no votes. They're not old enough to work, so there's no financial leverage. So what possible chance do these children have to compete with the clout of the corporate forces whose money influence Washington? And this is what the founders meant. Power should be in our hands.
Right.
Power should be in our hands. And we have been fooled, and we have been played. And so we're told that's not an issue. Nobody brings it up as an issue. So they think some of us are old enough to remember the Stepford wives. It's Stepford politics. It's Stepford politics. You will talk about this, you will not talk about that. You will concern yourself with this, you will not concern yourself with that. And with the military, let me give you this example. The U.S. Air Force has ordered 100 airplanes called the B-21 Raider. Now the B-21 Raider, we ordered 100 of them, and each one costs $550 million. Each plane costs $550 million, and they are all equipped to drop not only conventional, but also nuclear bombs. Could anyone in this room tell me, why do we need 100 airplanes that drop nuclear bombs? Because the nuclear bombs that exist today, all of them, make the bombs that dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima look like pinholes. You drop 5 of the nuclear bombs that we have, that will be the end of human civilization as we know it. You drop 10 of those, it's over for this species on this planet for, they say, 200, 300,000 years. So you tell me, ladies and gentlemen, you tell me, because we're not stupid. We're not stupid, and we need to stop acting stupid. Why do we need 100 airplanes that drop nuclear bombs when we have millions of children who are hungry, when we have millions of Americans who do not have health care, we have millions of Americans who can hardly make ends meet, we have millions of Americans who have to work 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet, we have millions of Americans who live with the chronic, what am I going to do if I get sick? What am I going to do if one of my kids gets sick? How am I going to send my kids to college? How am I going to pay off these college loans? It is a massive sea of humanity, and we, for the sake of profits for defense contractors and nuclear contractors, are spending $550 million on 100 airplanes that you and I both know are not there for legitimate security.
The people of the United States have been fooled, the people of the United States have been played, and as has been true in other times in our history, it is time for the people to step in. Now, we also know we have another major problem on our hands, which has exacerbated all this tremendously. And that is a leader who has harnessed some of the worst aspects of the American character in order to build his political base. And I just have to say, kudos to the president for being at the TMC this morning. When he's there with Kim Jong-un in North Korea. I think when it comes to things like China and North Korea and certain things like that, we have to really think beyond politics. So, you know, I think when something happens that we can appreciate the president from another party for, we should certainly do that. We all have to rise above just partisan politics and be patriots. We need to be patriots. But that must mean also we must be economic patriots. So what we have is a situation where, despite anything else, we have had the worst aspects of the American character: racism, bigotry, homophobia, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, xenophobia, harnessed for political purposes. And as I was saying earlier today, far more people in this country love than hate. We're good people. I believe that about the Americans. The problem is not that more people hate than love. The problem is those who hate with conviction today. And those of us who love must begin to love with as much conviction as is demonstrated by those who hate. And the love that will save the world, and the love behind which we must be so convicted, cannot just be love for our own families or our own children or people like us. The love that will save the world is love for people also on the other side of town, and people on the other side of the world, and children on the other side of town, and children on the other side of the world. For people who were not here this morning, I was telling the story about my trip last week to Homestead Detainment Center in Homestead, Florida. And on one hand, I climbed up on a ladder like you do there in order to look over and to see some of the young people who were at the detainment center. But what I was impacted by were not only the people I saw in the detainment center, what I was impacted by all the people on the outside who show up there every single day to bear witness to the agony of those children. Groups like Witness Homestead. Martin Luther King talked about a coalition of conscience. That is what we need in America today, in order to form a politics of love. Love is the only thing powerful enough to interrupt the patterns of injustice and true spiritual malfunction that underlies the very nefarious deviation from democracy and humanitarian principle that has its grip on us. The policies of injustice, both economic injustice and societal injustice, including what is happening in our immigration today. These powers cannot be fixed simply by incremental change. They represent something deeper than that. They represent a worldview in which people simply do not matter. America at its best is one in which the whole point is that everyone matters. But just like if you don't take care of your body, there's no point in being all surprised if later you find out you lost your health, and you don't take care of your business, there's no reason to later be surprised that your business is going down. We very naively thought we could farm out our political power. We farmed out our citizenship. We farmed out our conscience. We would say things like, oh, I'm not political. Other people are handling that. And that chronic political disengagement has brought us to where we are. Because people have and forces have taken advantage of that. So Donald Trump and the policies of the Trump administration that many of us so do not appreciate are like an opportunistic infection. They could not have occurred had it not been for a weakened societal immune system. The immune system, however, is awakened now. There has been an awakening in the last 2 years. It is time for us to move. So let me tell you what I will do as president if you place me there. Number one, We need a massive realignment of investment in the direction of children 10 years old and younger. There is absolutely no amount of fuel. There is no power in the ground. There's no power in the sun. There's no power in the air, in the wind. There's no energy that can come close to fueling us and driving us towards an era where America is better than it has ever been, where we have a future that is peaceful and prosperous. There is no power that can give that to us like the power in the human brain, particularly in the brain of the child. We know now things about what happens. We know now about things that happen in the brain of a child that we didn't know 50 years ago. The cognitive retention, the cognitive elasticity, the neuroplasticity. Everything happens before the age of 8. Now, when I was younger, some of us will remember this. Politicians used to always talk about peace and prosperity. And I used to say to myself, I wonder why they don't use that phrase anymore. I wonder why they're not talking about peace and prosperity anymore. My next thought was, I guess they just don't use that phrase anymore because it's kind of a cliche. And I thought, that's not what happened. It's not the goal. If your goal is economic prosperity, you don't have the economic system we have. Our economic system is not about economic prosperity. No generation should live only for itself, any more than any person should live only for ourselves. Our economic system has nothing to do with planning economic prosperity 10 years from now. It has to do with sucking profits out of the present for a small group of people. I'll tell you what you do if you want economic prosperity 10 years from now. Take better care of your 10-year-olds today. Yeah. That's what you do. Massive realignment of investment in the direction of children, particularly 10 years old and younger, but our children and our youth. I want a Department of Children and Youth. Right now we have a Department of Education, and within HHS we have Administration of Children and Families, but when you have the millions of children chronically at risk that we have today, we need to really up this, ladies and gentlemen. And we have what we need. We have the elementary school teachers who know what to do. You know, if you're going to unleash the spirit of America, that's what we need to do now. We need to unleash the spirit of America. You know, I'm a progressive Democrat. I want the progressive democratic things that people want. I want the $15 an hour minimum wage, and I want Medicare for all. I want it as an adjunct to Obamacare. I want the free college at state universities and colleges. I want a removal of the college loan. But to me, that's not the end. That's the beginning. I want those things just so that we can unleash people's spirits, uncap people's dreams. That's where money comes from. That's where prosperity comes from. That's where peace comes from. Help the American people be all that we can be. Right now, we have governmental policy that caps people's dreams. And go back to our mission statement. The purpose of the government is to secure the rights for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Everybody in this room, let me just ask you, is there anybody in this room who doesn't hold in your heart the dream of what you would do if you could do anything? What you would do if you could do anything. Now let me ask you, if you could do that which is what you would do if you could do anything, wouldn't it help other people? Wouldn't it lift the vibration of things? And when you lift that, guess what happens? People are more creative and people are more productive. People have time to be with their children. People have time to be with their families. People have time to be citizens. People are better employers. People are better employees. And one of the things that comes from that is money. Economics shouldn't be about, you know, we have this group of aristocrats, this matrix of multinational corporate power. It's just like the aristocrats hundreds of years ago, they dropped crumbs from the table. And this is what we have. We have one major political party that actually thinks that's kind of, it's been hook, line, and sinker by a lot of people who seem to think that's okay. It's what Franklin Roosevelt called the economic royalists. But too many people in the other major political party who say to us, well, all those crumbs are falling down, I could get you a cookie. I could get you a cookie. And I'm saying it's time for the American people to say, excuse me, we all get to feast here. That's America. And how do you feast? You feast, I think of myself, I think of my own career. I've been very blessed. I have a nice career, I have a successful career, and I know where it came from. It came from the fact that my parents loved me, I had good public education, and somebody really helped me. Her name was Oprah Winfrey. So I have looked at the fact
it has led to my success. If I worked hard, absolutely I worked hard, and I work hard still. But I know what have been the main factors and the fact that I've actually been able to succeed. There are three main factors. Someone helped me. The second one, someone helped me. And the third one, someone helped me. What's wrong with helping people? Not all help is codependency. Not all help is enabling. This is just propaganda that has been used to distract us from what our Declaration of Independence says the purpose of the government is. The purpose of the government is to secure your rights to pursuit of happiness. So the purpose of the government is to secure the rights of those children, those millions of children who are living in that chronic trauma. We have been, it's a psychological problem we have here. We've been trained to say, pretty please. This is the richest country in the world. It's supposed to belong to all of us. And if we did that, if the core of our governmental policy, both domestically and internationally, was to help people thrive and to ameliorate human suffering, there are people who say that's naive. There are people who say, oh, it's naive. She goes on and on. How our international policy should be based on our capacity to love each other. How naive. Let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. I'll tell you what's naive. What's naive is to think we're going to survive another 100 years on this planet if we do not. We have $750 billion on our military budget. We have on the State Department is about $40 billion. And even Donald Rumsfeld, who was the Secretary of Defense under George Bush, said we need to learn how to wage peace. You can't just take medicine, you also have to cultivate health. Sickness is the absence of health. Health isn't the absence of sickness. And war is the absence of peace. Peace isn't the absence of war. Right now, our national security agenda is basically just endless preparation for war. As though what, we're going to just back into peace? They don't even use the word anymore. They don't use the word prosperity anymore because the plan isn't prosperity for all. And they don't use the word peace anymore because peace is not the goal here. The goal, the primary governing principle of all domestic and international policy is short-term profits for major corporate interests. And then if the other stuff happens, that's good. We've really got to wise up here because this is a virulent form of capitalism. I consider myself a capitalist. I consider myself a capitalist. But capitalism must return to its moral core. I do not believe that complete amorality. I'm not some. Some people believe that capitalism is inherently amoral. I don't, actually. That whether or not it's played from a moral place has to do with the consciousness of the capitalist. And when I was a child, the corporation was expected to care. The corporation was expected to care. If somebody had worked for the corporation for decades, the corporation was expected to care whether or not that person had a dignified retirement. This craziness really started in the 1980s, ladies and gentlemen. And it has just simply been a train that has not stopped. Sometimes it's gone faster, sometimes it has gone slower. But the issue is that there must be morality in both our public affairs as in our private affairs. And if love should come first, in our private lives, love should come first in our public lives. That's how we would have peace and prosperity. So right now, you spend $750 billion on ways to wage war. And then you have a $40 billion budget, $40 billion budget for our State Department. And the State Department is diplomacy and mediation and development. Now within that, there's $17 billion that goes to the USAID, which is humanitarian interest. But then there's a skill set called peace building. You can't just take medicine. You also have to cultivate health. Your diet, your exercise, etc. There are those who coach you on health. It is no less important. And the function of the peace builder is no less sophisticated, and the skills are no less significant than are the functions of the military. So what do the peace builders do? There are 4 factors which, when present, statistically establish greater incidence of peace, and a lower incidence of conflict. They are, not going to shock anyone, number 1, greater expanded economic opportunities for women, expanded educational opportunities for children, reduction of violence against women, and the amelioration of unnecessary human suffering. When you do those things, you build peace. Desperate people do desperate things. Desperate people are more vulnerable to ideological capture by genuinely psychotic forces. That's why we should see large groups of desperate people as a national security risk.
And as president, I would have a domestic department of peace. Our political system is stuck in 20th century thinking. The modalities by which the problems are conceptualized are 20th century. There's no imagination there. There's no visionary thinking there. As I said the other night, JFK didn't say, I've talked to some people and I know how we could get a man to the moon because we could put it together, and I became a NASA scientist last night and I've become educated about it, etc. No, he said, we are going to land a man on the moon by the end of this decade. And that harnessed the power. It harnessed the political will because it harnessed the national imagination. We've gotten out of the habit of doing great things. We've been reduced. This is about our psychological waking up. This is about our emotional and spiritual revival. We're Americans. We have a national crisis on our hands, an international crisis on our hands with climate crisis. We have 12 years to fix this. Simply, we're going to do this. That's what we need. We're going to do this. We're going to reverse climate change. It can be done. We're going to do it. We're going to develop the sustainable energy, the sustainable transportation. We're going to have a Green New Deal. We're going to create millions of jobs. We're going to deal with all those factory farms, all those CAFOs, because of all the nitrous oxide and the methane. We know what we have to do. When it comes to our children, we have the people who know what to do. We have the people who know how to do the anti-bullying, who know how to do the violent prevention, who know how to do the wraparound services, who know how to do the trauma-informed education, who know how to put mindfulness in the schools, who know how to do restorative justice, who know how to do conflict resolution. We have people who know what to do to sequester the carbon, who know what to do to reforest, who know what to do to develop the sustainable energy. We have people who know what to do to build peace. It's not like America does not have the people with the skill sets necessary to turn this country around. We do, but they are not given the resources, they are not given the focus, they are not given the support, because our governmental policy is driven not by those things. Those things, what will they do except save our democracy and save our planet? Those things will save our democracy and save our planet, but they're not the things that will necessarily create short-term corporate profits. It is that bad, ladies and gentlemen. But let me tell you something. If you go to the doctor, you expect the doctor to tell you if the test results didn't come in good. How can the doctor heal you if the doctor doesn't first tell you that the results didn't come in well? We have a politics where nobody wants to upset you too much, because then you're considered negative, and so the political operatives say, don't be negative if people don't like it if you're negative. I'm having an adult conversation with you. I'm still not interested in this high school conversation where we don't really talk about the things that matter most. I'm not interested, and that's not why I'm here. Rather, I believe that we are good people, we are decent people, we are smart people, we are intelligent people, and it's time for us to recognize that part of ourselves and to act from that part of ourselves in politics as well as everything else. We don't have a lot of time left. And we have a president who is someone, and we've seen this in history before, we see it in other parts of the world, and we should not kid ourselves that this is not extremely dangerous. This is a man who has a very powerful personality. And he uses the power of his personality. It is misapplied in some very, very dark ways. This is not just about his policies, ladies and gentlemen. This is about a psychic effect that he has on people. We've never seen this in this country before at such a high level. He will not be beaten just by people who have certain policies. What this man represents is not just a politician. This man is a phenomenon. And he will not be beaten, I don't believe, by a traditional inside political establishment. The only way we are going to defeat a phenomenon at the polls in 2020 is by creating a phenomenon. And we will not create a phenomenon just by having a nice conversation about policies, about what we'll do if we get the power, because you got to get the power. And even if you get the power, let's say something like climate change, once we get in there, you think the fossil fuel companies won't be coming right back after you? The day after the inauguration, let's grow up and let's wise up, ladies and gentlemen. We are being played for fools, and we are acquiescing to what is essentially a foolish way of moving forward. We need to get that there has to be an awakening in us. The American people need to wake up, and we have it in us to do that. And when we do, there is nothing that can stop us. Nothing short of that will defeat this president, and nothing short of that will truly self-correct this country. We have to remember who we are. We had slavery in this country, but you and I are not just heirs of the problems. We are the legacy of the problem solvers. Identify not just the problem, identify with the problem solvers. We are the legacy. We are the generation that follows abolitionists. We are the generation that follows women's suffragettes. We are a generation that follows the civil rights movement. We're not nothing, and it's our turn now. It is time for us to wake up, and I'm in a church so I can say it. We need to pray really hard right now. We need to think really hard right now, and we really need to kick ass. Thank you.
But, you know, you're talking about, I agree with a lot of what you have to say, but you're talking about kids in school. From day one, when I was at school, I'll never forget it. I would make fun of, I couldn't wait to get out of high school so I could join the military. And don't thank me for this, but I'm a Vietnam vet. Anyway, I got out of Vietnam and started going to church up here in Waterloo, Iowa. And I got sat under a ministry, a positive thinking type person, that got me to believe in myself. And I've never relied on the government to help me do anything. I've never drawn an unemployment check in my life. With God at my side, I give all the credit to God. I made it, and I made it pretty good in life. I'm an industrial, commercial painting contractor. But I do agree with most of what you have to say, and you're the only person that I saw on the debate stage the other night that I would vote for. I'm not saying that to tickle your ears. There's other people out there that are telling you what you want to hear, which they won't be able to fulfill probably any of it, or very little of it. And my wife and I are right-to-lifers. We both voted for Donald Trump. But the biggest thing I like about Donald Trump is his 2 picks on the Supreme Court. There's a lot of other stuff I disagree with him on, but I'll let somebody else talk. So.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. That was very impactful. Thank you. You have your hand up, Angela?
This is for my family of hunters, and especially my friend Sean. When it comes to the Second Amendment, I know that you're a full supporter. I know your dad was in World War II, and I know that you believe in, the need for our military. The question about things like magazines and bone stocks, that's just got to go. I believe that too.
I agree with you.
But however, a lot of these weapons that are considered assault weapons are also really used for hunting rifles. And so I'm having a problem, kind of convincing that over with some of my, friends and family that, look, it's not about taking your guns, but they're like, well, what about this? And who's this for hunting? And I know there's a lot of people that don't like hunting, but it puts food on my table, so I appreciate you doing that for us.
I understand, and I brought up my daughter in Michigan. So tell me why you need a military assault rifle to hunt.
Yeah, he's a hunter.
I mean, I'm a man and not the hunter.
Okay,
but-
why do you need an AR-15 to hunt?
Well, and I agree that AR-15s, but there's
That's what
other
we're
types
talking
of
about.
guns
We're
that
talking
are
about
considered
military
assault
assault
rifles. I just think we need to be maybe more particular about this so that we don't lose, that group, because they can believe in everything else.
I'm more interested in that we're losing our children.
Yeah.
We do have a Second Amendment. None of us should have any desire, I don't believe, to mess with the Bill of Rights. It does say in the Second Amendment, in order to have a well-regulated militia. And so you can have a car also, but that doesn't mean that there aren't rules, that doesn't mean there aren't regulations. I think there should be universal background checks. We should need to close these loopholes at gun shows, close the boyfriend loopholes. We should
ban bump stocks, and yes, I absolutely believe we should get rid of these AR-15s. I don't think that they should be available. There will be millions, even when we do that, there will still be millions on the streets that people already own. We will not be able to get rid of them. We can have a buyback plan, but that doesn't mean everybody's going to want to sell it. But what we can start doing is regulating and identifying the bullets.
What about ammunition?
That's how we can do it. And for the people who say, I'm afraid, and that's not, that taking away the military, the right to buy a military assault weapon, an AR-15, etc., it is simply what I stand for. And when people say to me, as I said to you, Angela, when people say, you can't take away my gun, you're taking away our children. It still has a Second Amendment. It still gives the right. I lived in Michigan. And by the way, if you look at the will of the American people when it comes to guns, this is interesting. Everything goes back to just fixing our democracy. And because if you have the will of the people, we talk about what a divided nation we are. We aren't that divided a nation. It's just that in issue after issue after issue, the government is not doing what the will of the people is. Because when you actually look at the will of the people on guns, we're not that divided. If you actually look at the will of the people on many of these things, the problem is that our democracy is so broken because of the money that is involved there, because of the gerrymandering, which unfortunately will not change now after the Supreme Court decision the other day. It is the fact that the will of the people is not what's being carried out. So I think that there has been a change in this business with the guns. I think we must put the safety of our children first. I don't think that that means that we have to take away anybody's Second Amendment right. I even agree with the conservatives about why the founders put it in there.
Right.
So I don't have a problem with that. But the problem for me is that we must remember who this government is for, and it's for the people of the United States and the overriding interest. On every issue, you're going to have a balance. You have the concern for the public good, and then you have the issue of individual freedom. And the government must always come down on the side of the concern for the public good. So that's how I see that. And in my experience in Michigan, I don't see why somebody wouldn't still be hunting.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to tell a little story about someone I know. His name is Miguel. And he came to our home when he was 5. He came from a drug-addicted home. And he was taking care of his young brother and sister at the time, 5 years old, trying to help people. This is what his life was like for a while. And this year, he's gone a long ways, done a lot of things. This year he comes to me and says, Granny, my friend Justice is saying, perping on these girls. And he said, I'm going to tell him tomorrow, if he wants to perp on these girls, I'm not going to be his friend anymore.
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. I have one statement. I think you need to give a little credit to government for their actions on wind power, because if it weren't for tax credits and also tax deductions on vehicles, we wouldn't be where we are today.
Absolutely.
They needed those to be competitive, so
Absolutely.
I would just say that. But my question is, when you talk about free education, or college education for state colleges and universities, Iowa has, and I think I'm correct in this figure, 19 public or private colleges and universities in the state. We have 3 here in Cedar Rapids area, Cornell, and we have Cole, and we have Mount Mercy, all private universities. How are they going to survive if we give free education in the state institutions? It seems to me that what we're looking at here is the mistake we've made in the major metropolitan areas with our high school educations, and that we've gotten so huge that they can't teach anymore. And what I'm afraid of is we're going to push the same thing in the state institutions if everyone goes to the state institutions and we forego the private side.
Why would this necessitate why would what I have said necessitate foregoing the private center?
Well, it would necessitate, because if you've got middle America, are they going to pay $20,000 a year tuition to private universities or colleges if they can go to the University of Iowa for nothing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know who's all gonna do that unless you've got an awful lot of money, because you're not gonna be able to borrow money to go anymore. So that part of it out, granted, you're not gonna have debt, so what you're gonna do is you'll have Notre Dame will survive fine. And some of the big private institutions will do fine, particularly parochial type of universities. What I'm saying is the Coes and the Cornells, I don't know what their base is going to be to survive in a free college education
Let me
environment.
ask you a question. Until Ronald Reagan was the governor of California, the University of California university system was a crown jewel. And people could go to the University of California for almost nothing. And at that time, it worked. And there were still private colleges in California. There was still Stanford. There were still private colleges. So I think, and I'm not trying to express that practical economic matters do not matter, because they do. However, what we need to do as a country is first set our intention on what is right. What is our commitment? Is our commitment, because in today's world, if you do not have an opportunity after high school, and it should not have to be a liberal arts education. It should be the most amazing, profound matrix of technical colleges as well, and mentorship programs such as they have in countries like Germany. But if we make that our goal and say we are going to do that, because that is what the resources of government are for. And that is how many people pursue happiness. And that is how people pursue the opportunity to spread their wings in terms of what they can actualize in their lives. Then it seems to me if we start there, if we don't stop at, well, but how would we pay for it? And start with the commitment that this is what we need to have happen, because that is our civic goal and responsibility, then it seems to me, sir, that those things should come secondary, not that they do not need to be worked out. And I don't know the immediate answer to what you just said, although I've read enough about it that I should know about it. But I know that California did it. I know that California did it before, back people when I was growing up. And the college system in California survived fine. So if you give me your email, I'm going to find out, I'm going to get back to you about that.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
I will give you a partial answer.
Okay, give me the answer.
A partial answer to California. Back in those particular days, we didn't have that mania with college education. Today, everyone has to go to college to get ahead. Those days, that was not the issue. There people went into the professions, other than colleges, so you didn't have that solid demand that you have today.
Okay, now some people have some comments about that. Before we go to something else, some people have, I hear some, who wants to respond to what this gentleman just said? Yes, ma'am.
My nieces and nephews aren't going to college. They're choosing not to because it's putting them 100. My nieces and nephews and my daughter dropped out of college. They're choosing not to go to college, even though they're intelligent, wonderful thinkers. They don't want to be $120,000 in debt. So they're choosing not to go. I think what will happen, and I live in Mount Vernon, so I think what will happen is the universities will appeal to the broad masses. The Coes and the Mount Mercys and the Cornells are going to appeal to the more elite people who can afford or else get scholarships. That's kind of my projection. I don't know.
Yes.
I agree with that 100%.
Thank you. I worked for the University of Iowa for over 36 years. The last 26 was in the Office of Admissions and Orientation Services. I saw a profound difference in the child that wanted to be a college-educated individual from the beginning of my career there to when I left in 2015. So, when I first started, students came there for the love of learning, and that 4-year degree was to learn how to learn. It wasn't, your goal might be to get an English degree, but it was the love and the romance, if you let me use that word, of learning to learn. And that's the education that we were providing. By the time I left, we had students who wanted a canned curriculum. Teach me to be a business major. Why do I need to know Spanish? Why do I need to take international civilizations? Why do I need to have a global perspective on my education? I just want to be a business person. And my thought to you, Alan, and to those who are going to look at our education system is that we need to do what Germany does, that when you're an 8th grader or a 9th grader or a 10th grader, what's your aptitude? What's your passion? What makes you feel grand? And put you in that road of learning. And stop shaming people for becoming electricians and plumbers and car mechanics. These are vital parts of our society. And not everybody is of an aptitude to get a 4-year degree or a master's or a doctorate. That's not where their passion lies. And I would never stop someone from doing that. But let's find that child's passion and let's make them grow and bloom and be better through the education that we provide. So that's my
Isn't the training to be the electrician and the skilled manufacturing expert and so forth part of what we should have as a matrix of education available to people?
Exactly, because you want them to grow and you want them to grow and you want them to bloom. And not everybody grows and blooms in a classroom. They are hands-on people. I mean, that's all. I'm sorry.
I want you to know how much I enjoy this conversation, and to me this is what politics should be. It should be a container for all kinds of ideas, people coming forth with our wisdom. So let's stay on this basic conversation because I think it's important. Are you going to another topic or staying here?
It's kind of another topic, but it has to do with the children.
Okay.
And I'm not here to shame and blame anyone, but I have personal experience with the PTSD from domestic violence in the home as a child. And I love your message about children, I love your messages, but I haven't heard you say anything about our extreme problem with drug and alcohol addiction. And I am not here to shame addicts at all, but I worked in the private school, the public schools for 9 years, and I believe that has a direct impact on our children today.
Absolutely.
So
I couldn't agree with you
I would love to
more.
hear your ideas about how we're going to combat that.
Well, this is why the ugly head of economic injustice is so much at the root of so many of these problems. Because a lot of the domestic violence, a lot of these societal dysfunctions arise from the despair of human beings. And economic injustice is one of the roots of all this despair. This is why I say to people, such as in states like New Hampshire, where the opioid crisis is so terrible, we can talk about how to treat the addict, but we have to address the fact that you're saying now, that we are bringing up generations of children whose despair is going to be so great that by the time they're 15, it is almost inevitable that some form of societal dysfunction will emerge. That what we really have to ask ourselves when it comes to something like the opioid crisis is what kind of society do we have today that tens of thousands of people every year find it so hard just to live that they will do anything to get out of the pain. And that's why we need to talk about more. That's why my whole point is that if we have a politics that only speaks to the symptoms but doesn't speak to the cause, and it doesn't speak to the cause because it will have to address itself. That's what's happening here. So this is just one of the many forms. You know, it all seems so complicated, but it's not so complicated. That's why people use the term intersectionality today, because everything's connected to everything. You have people in enough despair, they're going to do anything they can to get out of that despair. Does that make sense? Okay, somebody else, yes ma'am, over there.
Hi, my name's Jan, and I would like to go back to the fact that we're being played, because there is enough money. We are being played. There is enough money. It's about how it gets used and how it gets spent and how we listen to lack. And there is no such thing as lack. It's about the proportion of how We are allowing people to make decisions about our lives.
And that's why getting money out of politics, the money in politics, dark money in politics is the cancer underlying all the other cancers. Louis Brandeis, the late Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis said, you can have large amounts of money in the hands of the very few, or you can have democracy. You cannot have both. And that's what I was talking about earlier. It's time for some economic patriotism in this country. Yes.
Hi, I'm Meredith, and I'm an ACLU Rights for All voter. Right now, we need to end mass incarceration. It hurts millions of people, especially those of color. In the last 20 years, 19 states have both lowered incarceration rates and reduced crime. This broken and unjust system needs to be fixed. So, as president, will you commit to reducing incarceration by 50% in your first term?
Yes, but that's just the beginning. We need to look at what's really happening here. Once again, we have to have some deep thought in this country. We're in America. The American character is very good with a to-do list. So we're real big on, okay, just tell us what to do and we'll fix it. Like, okay, 15% reduced in the first time, like that's the end of the conversation. That can't be the end of the conversation. We have to go get real here. So when I was in college, the incarceration rate in the United States, there were about 300,000 people incarcerated. Today, there are 2.3 million. And the term prison industrial complex is absolutely true. The private prisons is one of the largest urban industries in the United States. It is just one area where people are making billions of dollars off human suffering. Human suffering is a profit center. That's what's going on down at those detainment centers. When we're paying $750 a day to those private companies for those detainment centers, that's profit off human suffering. We have to deal with standards of engagement in neighborhoods of color. You know, there's a saying in that world, when it comes to prison in America, it's too easy to get in and it's too hard to get out. We know, for instance, the racial disparity in criminal sentencing. We know that blacks and whites do use drugs at basically the same rate, but a black person is far more likely to be sentenced to prison on a drug-related crime. And we know, in fact, the Supreme Court has given the police the opportunity and the permission now to stop cars, to actually, for standards of engagement in neighborhoods of color that are different. So the euphemism is just high crime, as though they're fighting crime. But we know that there's more going on than that. So we have to deal, in order to do that, it can't just be, okay, we'll get rid of 15. One of the ways we're going to get rid of 15, by the way, is to look at the horrifying way that we have locked up so many people, nonviolent drug offenders in this country. And I believe we will soon get to the point where marijuana is legal in all 50 states. And the minute that happens, if I'm president, we locked up children, so many young people, or I won't say children, but youth, for marijuana-related crimes. And these people should not only be released immediately, their criminal record should be expunged, and there should be tax breaks given to people who will be willing to employ them. So I will do more than 15%. It's deeper than that. I would have an attorney general who is very, very cognizant of the terrible built-in, inbred injustices, particularly racial injustices, that lead to the fact that we have so many people in prison to begin with. Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Hi, my name is Rebecca. I'm a lifelong Iowan. I am studying public health right now in Atlanta. I'm here for the summer. I want to thank you for running and for coming to the debate and coming here. I really like what you had to say so far. And I had a question, but I wanted to make a comment about the college issue, if I may. So I see there's a variety of people, a variety of different ages here. As a young person, I have to say that, yes, I think there are a lot of people going to college, a lot more than before. But for your experience with the young people who didn't really want to learn, who just want to go to college, to be able to get a job, I don't really think that's our fault. I think that's just how the economy is now. I mean, I have friends who've gone to college, I have friends who've gotten PhDs, I have friends who've dropped out of college, And my friends who dropped out of college, they're earning, $12 an hour working at Jimmy John's. There are no food, there's no prospects for them. They don't have health insurance. They're consigned to a life of poverty. So I think we need to be a little bit more compassionate when we're talking about the children who are
No, I
going
don't
to college.
Express any lack of compassion.
No, I simply meant that our,
We all get it.
I simply meant that our education system is flawed. Whatever path you wish to pursue that makes you greater and better and is your passion, I'm all for that, but we have a flawed system that has been brought up over 40 years that needs to be reassessed. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't think that there's, I see no, these are both true, everything you're saying. Really what you're speaking to is the core of what a liberal arts education means. This is why in Europe, where they do have more of a system where people decide early what it is they want to do, they also are more likely to take that gap year. So the civilization is still saying, go be a person. Go be a person. So I hear both, and what you're speaking to, and that's why I think both of these are so important. She's making a very good point. You and I grew up at a time where people could afford to make who I can be as insignificant in my life as what I'm going to do.
right.
And she's saying that the economic system today is such that young people don't even feel they can afford to think about who I'm going to be. I got to figure out what I'm going to do and how I'm going to make a living doing that.
Yeah, so I,
Yeah. Yes. Did you finish with that?
No,
I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay, no, I guess. I heard you saying that we can't trust the political system to fix itself, right? Which I totally agree with. But then we're talking about capitalism and how we need to have a compassionate capitalists. And you know that a capitalist is someone with capital, right? So it's someone with money to throw around. So if we can't expect politicians to voluntarily change the political system to make it better for everyone, how can we expect the capitalists with their profit-driven motive? I mean, even, I think, corporations were a little bit more compassionate in the past, and perhaps they are now, but of course, during the Industrial Revolution, there was child labor, there was horrific things, and the government had to step in. So how can we have a capitalist system that isn't?
Okay. So the answer is that the people have to regulate the government more than we're doing, and the government needs to go back to regulating capitalism. It is in the great tradition of the United States that we push back against the excesses of overreach by capitalism. That's why we have child labor laws. The first two times they tried to get child labor laws, they weren't able to get it. That's why we have unions. That's why a major facet of the corporatist agenda is to attack unions. So your point is why what we have done historically, that's why we have unions, that's why we have child labor laws, that's why we have antitrust laws, which today are practically a shill. So you're right, if capitalism does not get its act together, it will create its own repudiation and it will have nothing to do with just you or me. You have too many young people, such as yourself, who are already saying, what has global capitalism ever done for me? Too many young people who are saying about socialism, what is it I'm supposed to be scared of? The free health care or the free college? So this is not something, this is already happening. That's why you have very powerful, very successful capitalist leaders who are already sounding the alarm. You have people like Jeremy Grantham, people like Ray Dalio, who are recognizing this. You know, one of my favorite quotes is from a very, very successful Italian industrialist who's speaking to this kind of crisis when it happened in Italy. These were his words. I thought it was great. If we want things to stay the same, some things are going to have to change around here. And I think that's what some of these people are saying. You are absolutely right. And if I'm president, if you make me president, that is going to be my communication to those guys. All right, I give you like an hour to get your act together. I give you a year to show me some real change. Otherwise, I'm coming after you.
They are sounding the alarm right now, but what they're doing isn't, oh, let's have unions, let's pay our workers a living wage. What they're doing is they're having, what was that Supreme Court case where they said money is speech? huge corporations or people. Yeah, they're doing that, they campaign donations, they're taking away polling places, they're.
Okay, wait, we want to be very sophisticated, intelligent, and nuanced in our conversation here when you say they. Okay? Now, the Supreme Court in 2013 started chipping away at the Voting Rights Act. And that did allow for this spate of voter suppression efforts. Those voter suppression efforts are a very big deal. They are very much an aspect of trying to suppress the vote of disadvantaged people. An interesting thing that happened, remember, it was in 1965 that the Voting Rights Act was passed, and that is what was to secure that black people in the American South particularly would have equal access to the poll. In 2013, when the John Roberts-led Supreme Court started chipping away at the Voting Rights Act, John Roberts said, well, it's different today, we don't need it. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, in her dissent, this is what she said. That's like saying, it's raining, but the umbrella is working, so I obviously don't need my umbrella anymore. She said, the reason we don't have the problem is because of this law. And she absolutely predicted what has happened. However, that's one thing I don't think we can lay at the feet of corporate America, although those particular Supreme Court justices are there in large part to promulgate the corporatist agenda. I just think we want to be very careful, and I believe, and this is how I look at my running for president. I want to be an agent of change. I believe that we need a fundamental pattern disruption of the economic and political status quo of America. And I don't want to be an agent of chaos. And the last thing you need is somebody coming in there with, we have to listen to each other. President Eisenhower said that the American mind at its best is both liberal and conservative. There are high-minded liberal principles and there are high-minded conservative principles. Even though I'm a liberal, I understand there are also high-minded conservative principles. Some of the things that you were saying, sir, some of the things you were saying, they are. Now, you want to make a distinction between conservative and corporatist. Corporatist is something different. There's nothing about either conservatism or liberalism that is inherently amoral. It's just a question of how to achieve certain things. The corporatist agenda is amoral. So I believe that it's very important that we remember that. You could be right. It could be that American capitalism has gone so far off its moral core that there is no saving it. And look, I'm 66 years old. That's going to actually be your generation's decision. What I'm saying as a 66-year-old is that I don't think the bell has rung yet. I believe that there are enough people who are successful capitalists who understand the level of the problem and recognize that this has got to change. If you get, I believe, enough people in the White House, in the House, in the Senate, it's not going to be in the Supreme Court for a while, that we'll see what happens. And I believe that in my conversations with some very, very, very wealthy people who are corporate leaders, they know that if there's not some change there, your generation's coming after them. So I meant it when I said, make me president. I'm going to say, okay, I'm giving you however long I'm giving you. Does that make sense? We have deregulated in absolutely horrifying ways. And it has been the Democrats as well as the Republicans who have done this. Deregulated with the repeal of Glass-Steagall and so forth. And that's why it has to begin with getting rid of money in politics. We are not going to be able to overturn Citizens United anytime soon, given the current makeup of the Supreme Court. The first thing I would do is to submit to Congress legislation to establish public funding for federal campaigns.
My name's Tom, and I'm using one of these, actually a smartphone, but what I've noticed, and it's different from what people have been talking about, when you go out to a restaurant and you see a table of 4 people and all of them staring into their phones, and we're not listening to each other, and you just said that, and it just made that occur. I know you can't legislate what people do, but it's concerning to me that they're not talking to each other.
That's why I love this room. That's why I love what we're doing here. That's why I'm doing this. I mean, I've had a career of people, this is what I do, this is what I've done for 35 years, talking about personal issues. And I love that we're talking about our collective issues, but from a place of deeper conversation. We need to create more of these opportunities. Martin Luther King said, your life begins to end on the day you stop talking about things that matter. So this is why we need to recreate politics, to have conversations like this. The place where I'm most concerned, sir, what you just said, where it just drives me crazy, is when I see a table like that and one of the people staring at their phones is a baby. When you see these little ones who are like under 1 or under 2 or under 3, at the times their little brains should be looking around the table and learning what social cues are and social clues and learning, and instead they're being directed at such an early time of their brain development that people are peripheral. That actually terrifies me. I find that chilling. So thank you for reminding all of us.
Marianne.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, let me, just because I'm here,
Yep.
do you mind me, and then I'll go over there.
Hi, I'm Joanne,
Hi.
and thank you for bringing spirituality and politics together. It disturbs me that people think they don't belong together. I understand religion,
Right.
separate, but not spirituality.
That's just the path of the heart.
So thank you for doing that. And though this might be a little bit of a personal question, but it's kind of a guidance question. So when you were treated less than charitably on The View, I saw your email the next day that said, Megan, bless your heart. And I was thinking about, so many of your books have little prayers in them, asking for guidance when we're faced with challenges, personal, impersonal, whatever. And I was wondering, I wonder what Marianne is thinking right now and praying for. And so part of it is, I don't know if you would share that, but it's actually a little bit more about guidance about when we're faced with that kind of stuff, how to help us be charitable back. And my other question is, so in September, when you're back on the next debate stage,
No, the end of this month.
oh,
I'll be on in September if those of you who have not contributed will give at least $1. I need another $55,000 now to get to the third debate, but I will be on in the end of this month in Detroit.
okay, thank you. All right. So I guess it would just be, what are you hoping to accomplish in those future debates that maybe you didn't get to last week? Thank you.
In A Course in Miracles, there is a very interesting principle, which is you are 100% responsible for your experience. And if you do not take 100% responsibility for your experience, you pay a very high price. You cannot change your experience. If I had not been sloppy and made a self-indulgence, I've never run for president before. I have had a career where I'm careful. So this was unlike me to be so uncareful. But I made a sloppy comment about vaccines. And if I had not made that sloppy comment about vaccines, Meghan McCain would not have been able to do that to me. So as a person trained in these things, this was my responsibility. Now, the thing about Meghan McCain that's interesting, I had met her father years ago, and he was absolutely lovely and gracious, and even laughing about our differences in politics. So, when I decided to run for president, and this took me a year and a half of processing, I did so knowing there would be inevitable humiliation. There would be inevitable mockery. And so the stuff on the internet about me, since the debates, the mockery is so funny, even I found myself on the floor laughing. So, it is pretty funny at times. So, that, if I can't, one of the things I prayed for was a tougher second skin. I didn't go into this, I knew there'd be. And even with the second one, in terms of the debates, I certainly was prepared intellectually, but I was not prepared, and even having watched the debate the night before, I didn't expect a boxing match. And I'm not a boxer. There were people on that stage who know how to box. I didn't know how to box. But I'm going to hopefully I will learn how to box
in the next month, hopefully.
Oh,
Pray
yeah,
for
the
me, if you
microphone's
will.
on. Get punched in that field, learn.
Yeah, it's, I did not have the skill set necessary. But, pardon? Pardon? What'd you say?
The other candidates, you got their attention.
Yeah, oh, I definitely got some attention.
Most Google.
And it's been a very interesting, it's very interesting.
Just
But,
keep speaking the truth. Keep speaking the truth.
in less than perfect ways a couple times there. But you're right though, actually, with the content of what I said, I certainly can't apologize. So I hope that's answered. And
Nice lady against the wall over there.
yes.
Well, there's.
Okay, this lady, and then I'll come back to this lady. I hope that answered your question. Yes.
She out now?
Okay, so what I've heard is.
Okay. Oh, she's got to turn on.
This microphone doesn't work?
No,
It's
it's
just in the
on.
show.
Okay.
It's okay. Yeah, I've heard a lot of comments, and one of the things I work on a lot for myself is paying attention to when I say yes, but. Because if I say yes, but, my brain shuts down. And I think that's incredibly common. I think of myself as being really open, but the yabbas get me. And there is polarity, Democrat, Republican. So I loved your comment about we're not really that divided, and yet there are different positions. And one of the things that I see as a big challenge is that too often people act as if, oh, this is my position, I have to hold with it, and there is nothing of value over there. So what I see us needing as a country is more of a yes and approach. How would you go about creating that?
Well, it's a principle of righteous living, that no one has a monopoly on truth. No one has a monopoly on truth, and no side of the political spectrum has a monopoly on truth. And like I said, when Eisenhower said the American mind at its best is both liberal and conservative. And at their best, they are yin and yang. This gentleman and I had a conversation earlier today. You said something to me, sir, that was important for me to hear. And we're sort of not in the concert. Listen, all of us have to recognize what's happened in America today. Everybody's got their finger pointed at somebody. The problem is not anyone that's having their finger pointed at them. The problem is the pointed finger. And a smug, self-righteous, intolerant left-winger is just as dangerous to the emotional fabric of this country as a smug, self-righteous, intolerant right-winger. And some of the shutdown that you get from both sides these days is horrifying. It's one thing to say, I disagree with you. It's another thing to say, you shut up now. So I think that all of us, but from a spiritual perspective, we all, as I said to this lady, we all have to look at ourselves. We all have to look at ourselves and concern ourselves less with monitoring other people's behavior and more with purifying our own hearts. Okay, anybody else? I don't want to keep you longer. I mean, okay, this lady here, that lady there, I'll go to this lady. Okay, we'll go quickly. You go as quickly as you can to your commentary and question. I'll go as quickly as I can. Yes, ma'am.
I have two concerns regarding the debates.
Okay.
And I'm no slow thinking, so bear with me. Two concerns. One is, thank you for, beside this point, thank you for taking this path and taking your career into taking your career into such a testy area. Yeah. I respect that. But on that correct basis, I really respect all the 20 Democrats that are running. And I think to see the range of qualified people willing to put their lives where, like you are, is inspiring. And each one of them has a track record of years of, I wouldn't say sacrifice, but dedication to the public good. So I think it's an utter waste of time to demean anybody on that stage in any way. And I'd like to see every bit of time used to build on what you can do. So there, the message is really testy. The minute you mention love, the moderators don't know what to do with you.
There are no words with which I could describe Chuck Todd's face as he... And so I see the challenge that we have
is in marrying the language of love with politics. And so you have to say, not what I will do in Washington, but love will will stimulate compassion, of the policy of compassion, that type of thing, so that they know what you're going to do with love. Love alone is falling flat.
Well, if someone looks at my website, my issues section is as policy-driven and policy-specific as anybody's. And however, I did say the sentence, as important as these things might be. So clearly, with my language, I misrepresented myself, although you have no idea what it's like when you have that 45-second, you have that minute, you're done, and then if it's someone like me, I'm done, whereas there were a few other people on that stage, they were not done and they got to continue. Some of the dynamics were quite interesting. So I realized that I sounded to some as though I thought plans and policies do not matter. Plans and policies very much matter, and I have been talking about some plans and policies here today. When I talk about the children, when I talk about a Department of Peace, when I talk about peace building, when I talk about repealing the tax cut, when I talk about the end to those corporate subsidies. So of course I understand that. I'm a very practical woman. And so I left myself open a little bit with my lack of perfect expression. I understand. But yes, now I'm over there. Yes.
You've talked about economics.
Yes, ma'am.
I haven't heard anyone speak to credit reports.
To what?
Credit reports, credit scores. I think credit scores are one of the evils that exists, and they cause such disparity and influence our lives at every level.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what are we going to do about it?
I don't know. I've never heard anyone say that before, but it certainly is something to think about. So do you think that there is no reasonable, what are you saying exactly?
And I've asked various politicians and nobody's ever been able to
Yeah,
give me
because
an answer.
how would,
If you want insurance, they'll figure your premium out according to what your credit score is. If you want to borrow money for anything, that credit score affects what the percent interest you will pay is. And yet, we don't have a lot of say about our credit score. And it
in
kind of,
what way do you say we don't have a say about our credit score?
well, I think it kind of snuck up on people. And I think if you would ask this entire audience what all is involved in their credit score, that there would not be much in the way of solid answers. Yes, not
I
much
will
about it.
definitely look into this.
And I think that really, just about every facet of our everyday life is affected by that. And those criteria that make a high credit score be so beneficial to those who already have massive amounts of wealth. And the negativity that it has for those who have little wealth is immense.
I will
Limit the amount of credit cards you
look
carry.
deeply into this. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that. This gentleman here has your hand up, sir.
Painter told me that.
I have a couple easy ones. I'm just curious what your own spiritual practice is. What's your regimen to get ready to stand up and stand in front of the camera and talk about the Trump? And then after that, I'd like to hear what your...
Because many people said it was edible. The internet was full of stories. She had to have been stoned, she had to have been on marijuana. There's nothing wrong with that.
And the other question is like, what's your pump-up song? What do you listen
Okay.
to when you're getting ready to get from?
So, I'm a student of the Course in Miracles, and I also do transcendental meditation. So, whether it's a workbook of the Course in Miracles or it is transcendental meditation, I am very concerned. I'm not very concerned. I'm very aware. There are cameras here. There's a reporter in the room. I could say one thing and practically ruin my life. I could say, look what happened with the sloppy comment about vaccines. I'm aware. So I understand where some politicians go with that. Basically, make sure you say nothing outside the box. So this is a high wire. This is a high wire. I need to be careful in a way that I've never had to be careful before. Although I have a 35-year career, I'm not known for making stupid, even the thing about vaccines was so, I've never made that mistake. I've always been careful. I've always been very careful in my language about that. So I was really, when you asked where I went, I wasn't so upset with Megan, I was upset with myself. That was a self-inflicted wound. So I have to be careful, but at the same time, I'm not here to not say anything. That's the politics that I don't want.
Be real.
So the issue is to be authentic, to be prepared enough, to be intelligent enough, to be spontaneous enough, and yet not to be uncareful. So that's why I'm praying a lot. Because meditation is about the preparation of your nervous system. About the preparation of your nervous system. And we all know that. It's all about, like I remember seeing some graffiti once. To do is to be, Schopenhauer. To be is to do, Hegel. Do, Sinatra. The issue is, from a spiritual perspective, you work on the level of your being first. You work on the level of your being first. And you seek to be aligned with your wisest, your most intelligent, your most emotionally and intellectually sober, and then you do. So I'm very aware that the morning matters. Does that make sense? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Marianne. I just want to thank you for the level and dignity that you bring to the stage and everywhere that you go, so we appreciate it. Josh and I are actually the Youth and Family Ministry here at the Unity Center, and we are also Course in Miracles facilitators here at the Unity Center. We're part of a team, and so we really resonate with what you say and we appreciate it. I'm also a mother. I have a 16-year-old daughter, and I have some concerns about the disempowerment of women through healthcare right now, and I just wanted to know what your vision was for women's healthcare moving in the future, because when I was her age at 16, the only access I had was Planned Parenthood, and that was true for me until I had insurance when I turned 21. And so I just want to get your thoughts on that.
I think the attacks on Planned Parenthood have been horrible. And as you said, the vast majority of the work that they do has to do with providing health care to women. And in many cases, health care that those women would not otherwise be able to access. We all know what's happening here, that this entire spate of attacks on women's reproductive system, freedoms is a very well-planned, strategized effort to take a reconsideration of Roe v. Wade to the Supreme Court. And the truth of the matter is they might succeed. They will almost definitely succeed in getting it there, and they might succeed in overturning Roe v. Wade. If they do succeed in overturning Roe v. Wade, let's be very clear. There will still be abortions. Rich women will continue to have safe ones, and poor women will go back to the day of what we call the back alley abortions. And let's be very clear, women were harmed and some women even died. This is an attack on the full agency of women. This is more than an attack on reproductive freedoms. It is more than an attack on women's health care. It is an attack on the power of women. I don't believe abortion is a moral issue, but I believe for me it's an issue of private morality. The government should have no say in an individual's private moral decisions. And I believe, I have faith in the moral decision-making and biological choices of the American woman. So this is a time, this is another thing about the election in 2020. I think that there was a delayed realization to how much misogyny was involved in this last election. We have had, since the last election, not only a greater realization of the misogyny there, we've had the Me Too movement, and now we've had what's going on now with these attacks on reproductive freedoms. American women are in a fierce mood, and that will show in 2020.
Hi, I'm an alcoholic, and I've been sober for almost 4 years now. And I'm not a Christian, And I do have a program of recovery, and I just wanted to tell you thank you so much. By no coincidence, I found your YouTube videos right when I got sober, and your words have nourished my heart so much over the years.
Thank you so much.
But I also want to say, my mom is from Guatemala. She immigrated here. I have family there, and how does one not get into the despair of these children looking at these images?
They are children, and we're not. That's the significant issue here. They don't need our pity, they need our help. And that is what we've been talking about today ever since the early service. We need to turn our compassion for these children into political force. Love is not a passive emotion, it is a participatory emotion. Some people have taken fear and mean-spiritedness, they have turned it into political policy. It is now time for us to take love and compassion and turn it into political policy. And that is why, I don't know if you were here for the service this morning, I visited Homestead Detainment Center in Florida last week, and there were people outside the fence, some of whom in that Miami heat, who show up every single day to bear witness to the agony of these children. So there are so many ways, through so many groups, through ACLU, through Move On, through humanitarian groups, through religious groups, there's social justice groups. Ask how you can help, find out how you can help. Mahatma Gandhi said that the leader of the Indian independence movement was a small, still voice within. And this goes back into when you were talking about prayer and meditation, how you prepare yourself. In the Course in Miracles, there's a morning prayer. Where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say and to whom? Whatever area is the area of your passion, consider it your assignment. You have, given the fact that your mother's Guatemalan, for whatever reason, you have great passion for those children. That to me is like an internal guidance and direction. Do something. And you know, today, with Google, there's no excuse. You know, when people say, oh, I just don't know what to do. I said to one girl who said, I would help, but I just don't know where to go. I just don't know what to do. I said, I have seen you. Get online and find a Tom Ford camisole from 1995. In size 4. The one with the pearls, not the one without the pearls. And you stayed on that computer till you found it. So don't tell me you don't know how to Google. No more ditzy. No more ditzy. So when you as a woman say, I make yourself available to me. So you ask me, and I'm saying to you, the answer is, you know, it's a spiritual principle that everything you need is right here. The issue in life, usually everything you need is right here. It's how much we don't notice. And that goes back to what this gentleman said about everybody looking at their screen. You know, I fly on airplanes a lot. And I used to say, that most everything I knew I learned on an airplane. And I meant because it was so interesting sitting next to people and talking to people. Because when you're on an airplane, you're talking to somebody who doesn't know you, doesn't know anything about your background, doesn't have any preconceived ideas about you, and everybody's just a little bit more aware of their mortality than usual. So I used to find that talking to people on airplanes was so interesting. Today, everybody has their earbuds in before you even sit down. I remember sitting next to one person once, and she was watching a movie, and I sat there thinking, you know, if she knew, I'm really interested. It's just there's an assumption that the person next to you is not as good as the movie that you're watching. So these are changes. You know, when I talked before about an integrative approach to healing our society, it's just like an integrative approach to medicine. It's the external changes and the internal changes. It's not either or, it's both there. Okay, so I think there was one more. Okay, yeah, okay. I'm sorry, real quick, sir, just real quick.
Tell us a little bit more about your personal life. Where you're getting your funding from to run this?
I'm getting my funding from you. I'm so grateful that we got the money for the $65,000. I hope that all of you who wish will pick up a donation envelope. I'm sure we have them out there, right? Yeah. I do need those. I need another 55,000 unique donors to get into the third debate. I obviously don't have the kind of money that other candidates have. I think of my campaign like a bonsai tree. A bonsai tree has everything that the bigger tree has, it just can't go past the glass. So I have two really good people. They have 10 and 15 people, right? So, from here. I do, I'm not married, I have a 29-year-old daughter, and she's getting her PhD in history. And that's pretty much all I tell you, even if you...
Really fast?
Yeah, I'm sorry? Yeah, real quick.
You have a birthday coming up, and I'm not going to see you, so I want to say happy birthday.
Thank you so much, thank you, thank you.
I just wanted to say at 3 o'clock today at the Cedar Rapids Library, if people are still interested, we're having a silent protest for asylum seekers. Joni Ernst will be there, and I have signs if anyone wants to show up from 3 to 4 o'clock at the library.
Oh, I hope they'll all be there. Okay, very quickly, yes.
The other night at your debate, Pete Buttigieg,
Pete Buttigieg, Buttigieg.
he mentioned, we talked about climate change, and he mentioned the problems with industrial farming. There's a lot of them.
Yeah.
So he also said something about the biology in the soil. That's something that's not mentioned very much. Organic farmer on the conferences.
Yeah.
Listen about that stuff, and that's one single thing.
Actually,
Industrialized farming is,
he is not the only candidate who went there.
okay.
Because if you might remember, when I said we do not have a healthcare system, we have a sickness care system. And in order to be healthy, we have to look at our environmental policies, our food policies, our drug policies, our agricultural policies. Nothing to apologize for, but I'm very, very aware. And the issues of agribusiness, not only in the decimation of farming, regenerative agriculture, etc. And it has been very heartening to see how many people here in Iowa are part of a great movement, to return. There is something about farming. There is something about agriculture. You talk about something that goes back thousands of years. That is so primal, that is so significant in terms of humanity's relationship to the soil, humanity's relationship to the earth, humanity's relationship to food. And this is just another example where huge corporate forces came in and went out, and only for the sake of their own short-term profits, and with a kind of that's exactly what I'm talking about. There is no greater example of the decimation of the fragile bonds of human relationship to economy, human relationships to land, human relationships to food, than what agricultural conglomerates have done in states like Iowa. So I'm just so heartened to meet people like yourself, sir, who are standing firm and are going to set the boundaries that need to be set, and we will reclaim agriculture for the goodness in our hearts. The cool thing is to see all these young people. We now have a generation of young people who think being a farmer is like really cool. So it gives me hope for America. Okay, so one more, and then we'll yes.
You were talking about the opioid addiction and stuff like that. I'm going to go on the other side of that because my wife has chronic severe pain, and in Iowa, the way they dealt with the opiate addiction is to cut out all pain meds. So she suffers every single day. What would you do?
Well, so that's a state thing that they've cut out.
But it's getting around.
One of the things that people talk about in terms of this is how the legalization of marijuana can be of value. Now, in my previous career, you know how we would end up. We can't end it quite that way, but we can certainly end it with a nice. We can take this opportunity to lay aside all superficial preoccupation and center ourselves in our hearts and in our nobility and in our wisdom. We send our love to each other and our love to our country and our love to all of them. We seek the love that casts out fear. We seek the peace that casts out violence. We seek the joy that casts out fear. That's it. Thank you very much. I hope that you will put this information on your social media, tell your friends. I will be back here. Please let people know, if you give us your phone number on the mailing list as well, we will text you when I'm back. And of course, like I said, I need those additional donations just to support the campaign and also just to be able to be in that third debate. Thank you for the call.